Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. Let me briefly adjust my set just so you can better see my play button because I had to set up somewhat quickly. I just came home from the gym. Today is a very interesting stream to me personally because, like in the last stream, we reacted to the Google Pixel 9 event. The event itself was horrible. The device itself is somewhat divisive. I don't think it's well priced considering that it's running on like the Tensor G4 chip. But that's neither here nor there. We all understand, of course, that there are compromises to be made. Apple, for example, doesn't have the best cooling in their devices or the fastest charging. Oh, okay. I've checked. As you always know, I have YouTube right next to me so that I can see if the stream is working well. Now you got to hear it too. Seems like I am live about now, so that's very appreciated. But we reacted to basically the Google Pixel 9 unveil. We've covered a lot of Apple topics. In the past, it's not too long ago. And basically, one of the most weird rumors in recent memory has been that of an iPhone 17 Slim. Basically, this idea that in the year 2025, we are not getting an iPhone 17 Plus in the family. Now, that in of itself was not that surprising because we all kind of expected that the Plus might go the way of the Mini because it's simply not selling that well. So we asked ourselves, well, what would that mean? Will Apple be left with three models in the lineup, like an iPhone 17, the 17 Pro, and then the 17 Pro Max? Maybe rebrand the Pro Max at that point to an Ultra to just have a little bit more spiciness, I guess, in terms of branding. And then over time, we got the rumor that Apple would have a brand new iPhone model focused on slimness and reduced weight, and we called it an iPhone Slim for a while. And now it seems like the rumor mill is clearing up a little bit. I still have some issues with the points being proposed, but I think I can now agree much more with the broader idea of an iPhone Slim, or now as we will start calling it, an iPhone Air or an iPhone 17 Air to actually be precise, because the biggest problem with the original iPhone Slim rumor or iPhone 17 Slim rumor was that it would be cost at like $1,300, that it would either match or even exceed the base pricing of the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and that to me just didn't make sense. One camera instead of three, 8 gigs of RAM instead of 12, like regular A19 versus A19 Pro. And I was just asking, like, who would buy it for that kind of money? Like, how much weight can they really save? Like, yeah, the Plus model is like already lighter than the Pro Max, and you can make it arguably a little lighter by reducing like the battery capacity, by taking one camera away or something like that. But why would you at that point start charging more, especially significantly more? We can argue if it maybe should start at $1,000 because of inflation, because Apple will finally add LTPO panels. Basically, there will be technical advancements, but at what point it would be justified for it to be more expensive than the Pro models, that just made absolutely no sense to me. And given now the more recent rumors that we're getting here, now it actually starts making sense to me. So I'm very, very glad to see that, my brain was not completely broken on that. But before we start to go fully into it, I just want to remind you guys to do all the YouTube jazz, as we call it on this channel. Please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, sharing it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment on the video. As I always say, I love me a lively live chat. I know Thursday is not always the ideal day for a lot of viewer interactions, but hey, if you have any questions, if you want to share your opinions, that's always very much appreciated. Love interacting with you guys. And beyond that, if you want to support this channel directly, you can leave a super chat or a super sticker right while I'm live, guaranteeing that I will see your comment. Or you can, of course, become a channel member right here on YouTube. So shout out to all the MarkTech Pro Max supporters over there. I'll have to count all of them and give you all the right names, because we got like a new supporter yesterday, and it's hard for me to like pronounce his name out on the top of my head. And you can become a supporter on Patreon as well. The link for that is in the description of this channel. So before we start, as always, cheers, because I need my Coke or I'll fall asleep. And let's actually look at the broader picture, right? Now, there is, there are a lot of analysts covering iPhone sales. And I do have my issues with how some people try to analyze iPhones, and especially like general interest in iPhones or any Apple tech. I think people try to like focus on one or two like hardware like news, and then they will say, well, those things will sell the device. And that is just not the case. People like improvements, but people don't just like random improvements. People like improvements that are easy to market, easy to share with family and friends, easy to show off on the internet. People don't necessarily care about like, oh, it's a 5% larger battery that charges 5% faster. People will actually care, well, how does it impact battery life? Does my phone maybe not get as hot anymore when I charge it? Things like that, basically. So, and with the iPhone 17 lineup, the question was, well, how will it sell once we eliminate the Plus model? It's not that the Plus model sells a lot. It's, I believe, way less than 10% of the overall iPhone's sales revenue. Actually might be closer to 5, which at that point, of course, would not be a big impact, and likely the people who wanted a Plus model would just either go for the regular 17 or one of the Pro models. But people have basically asked themselves, well, how will Apple compensate for the lack of a Plus? Because obviously, if you want to have growth, you still need to sell people on something. And by eliminating choice, you usually lower sales, even if it's by a few percentage points. So this is how basically the iPhone Air is being treated internally at Apple. It's that it might be a sales boost, but it just might rekindle interest. Now, I want to make a big point here, which is that a lot of people underestimate the power that developers, like engineers, have internally sometimes. And when they get really, really bored of making the same thing over and over again. Now, I am one of the people who does not agree with the idea that iPhones are just the same thing year by year. But I do understand why having the same kind of family between regular model, Plus model, Pro model, Pro Max model might, of course, become a tad tedious, especially if the design doesn't change that much. And now that brings up the question, what can Apple do that would excite customers not just to potentially buy a new iPhone that stands out inside the family, but also an iPhone that might actually be worth talking about, worth analyzing from a hardware perspective, from a design perspective. And so right now, basically that point of excitement will be the iPhone 17. Shout out to Front Page Tech, who has done some great renders on it. Those are part of my thumbnails, so shout out to those guys doing the rendering. It's pretty great. Here we can clearly see that it's very much inspired by the new iPad, the 5.1 millimeter thick iPad Pro. So, and basically people are saying, now this is according to Jeff Poo, who has been hit or miss with his analysis, and I will disagree with some of the points being made here, but still think it's worth covering. So here's saying that basically the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro might not be like as comprehensively like big hits with the audience. Now, I personally disagree with that. I think when people are saying stuff like limited spec upgrades, they really are ignoring the fact that that will mean less and less spec upgrades that might actually come to the 17 models down the road. I think that the base 17 model, by finally getting LTPO and ProMotion, will get a big step forward. But I think that the 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max models will actually not be as big of an update as the 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max. So, for one, let's start with the 16 family as it's rumored right now. So, 16 and 16 Plus will keep to a two-camera layout on the back. That camera layout will change from diagonal to vertical. It will finally able to shoot spatial videos, things that will work with Apple Vision Pro. The action button will come to the regular iPhone 16 and 16 Plus models, while the Pro models get the capture button. So button upgrades across the board. There will be A18 chips for the entire family. The Pros might have a more powerful variant with like more enabled GPU cores or something like that. The Pro versions will go from 6.1 and 6.7 inch displays to 6.3 and 6.9 inches respectively. They're also getting M14 material OLED panels that will allow them to be brighter and allow them to potentially have a longer lifespan and be more efficient. The Pro models will supposedly be getting Wi-Fi 7 and 5G Advanced. Now, of course, 5G Advanced is kind of a marketing trick, but everything is a marketing trick. I would argue that most people with like a regular ass connection at home will probably never really benefit from Wi-Fi 7 in the next decade or so anyway. But hey, a better antenna, a better modem with a better antenna can also mean better performance on Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 6E, and a 5G advanced modem can mean better performance on 5G or better battery life, things like that. The regular 16 Pro model will inherit the 5x zoom camera from the 15 Pro Max. So it will still be a 12 megapixel sensor. So while the ultra wide camera goes up to 48 megapixels, and of course the main camera has been 48 megapixels for a while, the telephoto camera will stay at 12 megapixels this year. Yes, so those are the colors rumored for the regular iPhone 16s, while the 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max are rumored to get a new rose gold or bronze or gold color, depending in which color the leaker sees depending on under which lighting the leaker sees those models, and then they talk about it, and then we don't quite know the color that they will actually be like. And now people are saying, well, the iPhone 17 will help boost sales. And that to me makes no sense, because everything that we've heard about the iPhone 16 family is that Apple will actually be producing more, as they expect some hype from the adopting of Apple Intelligence technology. Of course, the 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max getting larger screens is kind of a big deal. I know it's just 0.2 inches, but hey, sometimes 0.2 inches can make the difference. And of course, the 16 Pro and Pro Max models will actually be getting a new main camera sensor. Now, a lot of people will say that, like, oh, the cameras are already good enough, you can barely tell the difference. But guys, what do you believe sells a new Pro iPhone better? Like a new main sensor that might make it significantly better in low light scenarios, that might give you sharper images, that might give you like faster capture, so you have potentially like less blur or something like that? or do you think the lack of a new main camera will sell it better? Because you know which iPhone models will not get a new camera sensor? The 17 Pro models. The 17 family will be upgrading the front facing camera. The front facing camera will be moving to a 24 megapixel sensor across the entire 17 family, so it's not 17 Pro exclusive. There will be finally a 48 megapixel sensor for the telephoto. So this year we're getting a 48 megapixel sensor for the ultra wide, and next year we are getting a 48 megapixel for the telephoto. However, the main sensor is getting better this year on the 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max. The main sensor will still be likely the same 1 by 1.4 inches on the 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max as it is on the 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max. Now there still might be changes like potentially a much better image signal processor with a better algorithm that makes those photos much better or something like that. But from an actual change in camera hardware, I would argue the 16 Pro has a more exciting upgrade than the 17 Pro. The only thing that could stand out is potentially even better optical zoom on the 17 Pro models. Maybe Apple could somehow, I'm not sure if the logistics exist for that much, or maybe they could adopt like technology similar to what Sony's using, which they have variable zoom that goes from like 3x to 7x or something like that. So maybe Apple could do something like that, maybe a sensor that goes from like 4 to 8x. Or they just go completely crazy and give you like a 10x but fixed optical zoom. So we've heard rumors about something like that, but those are very, very much like rumors. Like very much of that has been like well corroborated. 12 gigabytes of RAM for the 17 Pro models. Again, it's a nice update. It's something that enthusiasts like I do care about, but I also don't believe that this is like a mass selling point for iPhones. Like iPhones have sold with 3 gigs of RAM, with 4 gigs of RAM, with 6 gigs of RAM, with 8 gigs of RAM. Like I think that it's certainly going to be nice to see a 12 gigs of RAM iPhone model, but I don't think that that will change the perspective that people have on the Pro models. That being said, who knows, maybe some AI features would become exclusive to the new Pro models as they get more RAM to handle more intensive like language models, but you never know. People are also pointing out that there might be a refreshed design. I still don't quite know what that would actually mean in the context of the entire iPhone 17 family. It certainly makes sense to me with like the iPhone Air that we'll be discussing right now, but like the entire family likely won't change that much from the small changes that we saw with the iPhone 15 series, where it kept the squared off design but just slightly rounded off the edges. We are rumored to be getting potentially a narrower dynamic island. I still don't know why that would be Pro Max exclusive. It sounds like it would actually make a bigger impact on the regular Pro with a smaller screen. So potentially that would change. Maybe some of the 3D depth sensors could move to under the display. But again, I like those are also like rumors that were like done way in advance, like years prior. Like people like Ross Young have leaked like Apple's basically next decade to how they are gonna change the iPhone displays, which also said that like the iPhone 17 would get LTPO panels, and then they also pointed out that we would be getting progressively like smaller dynamic islands to at some point like the camera would also go to under the display, and we would have an entirely full like front screen iPhone without cameras, without notches, without dynamic islands, without visible sensors for Face ID or anything like that. Now, again, you can take it with a pinch of salt. I personally am, but definitely, if those changes materialize, I could see it selling a little better because of that. but I just don't think it will do too much when it comes to boosting sales. I think at this point, just a lot of people are very comfortable in having a fixed 3-4 year like upgrade schedule. And to them, it doesn't matter what changes come to a specific model. They just wait their specific time, buy a new iPhone for the next 4, at this point, maybe even 5 years. Some for might be for even longer. And then they just are happy with whatever new stuff comes to them, and they don't think that much like, oh, if I waited another year it would be way better, or if I got like last year's iPhone I might have gotten a little less but much earlier, and something like that. I just don't think that a lot of the audience thinks like that. Certainly enthusiasts sometimes do, but I would also argue enthusiasts, like the rich kind especially, tend to buy models every year or at least every other year anyway, and I don't think it changes that much. Like, for example, I will not be getting the 16 Pro Max, but not because I'm more excited for the 17 Pro Max. It's because I have the 15 Pro Max, right? So a 1 year upgrade from the 15 Pro to the 16 Pro, in my eyes, will be more impressive than an upgrade from the 16 Pro to the 17 Pro, because the 16 Pro will be getting the larger main sensor, a larger screen, things that I actually really care about. And then the 17 Pro will get like a better zoom camera and maybe some other changes, like supposedly like a new adhesive for the battery that will make it very easily to like take out and switch out. Like, I don't care much about those things, but by the time I upgrade from my 15 Pro Max to a 17 Pro Max, well, guess what? I will not just be getting a larger main camera sensor and a 48 megapixel ultra wide. I will also be getting a new 24 megapixel front camera, and I'll be getting the new optical zoom, especially potentially with the changes on the Pro models, the Pro Max models that was like rumored to get some kind of 10x ultra zoom. And if Apple narrows the dynamic island at that point, well, I'm certainly not complaining about that. I would already be getting a larger model, even if I got the 16 Pro, like a larger screen, but now I would potentially be getting a more immersive screen with a smaller dynamic island, right? You see where the upgrade makes much more sense once individual improvements just like are combined year over year, instead of just saying like, oh, it's good, like this one update is so good that everyone with every previous iPhone should get it. That's just not how it works. It very much depends to what matters more to you and which previous model you own. And of course, yes, for me, I would be going from an A17 Pro chip with 8 gigs of RAM to an A19 Pro chip with 12 gigs of RAM. I have personally bet here on this channel that I believe that A19 is very likely to be a 2 nanometer processor. I think that TSMC is currently investing a lot to make sure that they stay ahead of Samsung and Intel, who are currently like ramping up their own gate all around designs for their own transistors and their own nodes. So that would definitely be nice, because I would be moving to from a 3 nanometer chip with 8 gigs of RAM to a 2 nanometer chips with 12 gigs of RAM. So you see, but if I had already like the A18 chip inside the 16 Pro, would I really care then about the like the percentage-wise smaller upgrades in terms of raw performance, right? Like even the A18 will be on the N3E node, which of course already will be more efficient than what I have on the N3B node inside the A17 Pro. That will narrowed the gap between 2 nanometer and 3 nanometer, like an in-between node usually does. So again, those are my considerations. You don't have to perfectly share or agree with them, but when people say like, oh, this will increase sales, I'm not so sure. However, there is one thing that could potentially really improve sales, and that is an iPhone 17 Air, as they call it here, a brand new iPhone model that will replace the iPhone 17 Plus. It will sit between the base model and the 17 Pro, which I assume with that they mean pricing wise, because obviously the 17 Pro will be size wise actually smaller than the Air. The Air is rumored to have like a 6.5 or 6.6-inch screen. Of course, the 17 Pro, the regular one, will still be at 6.3 inches, and then the Pro Max will be at 6.9 inches, making it, of course, a lot larger. The new iPhone 17 Slim is expected to feature a new, much slimmer design, and Jeff Poo believes that there will be a lot of people interested in buying an iPhone 17 Slim because of that novelty factor. I honestly am not so sure. Like, I believe the novelty factors work really well on like not so like mature devices where everything is new. Like, oh, the iPhone 5 goes from 3.5 inches to 4 inches. You can argue that maybe even the iPhone 5C was a novelty because it was made of plastic, and Apple usually doesn't like plastic that much, which granted wasn't even that true at that time, because up until the iPhone 3GS, the iPhone 3G and 3GS were plastic. A lot of iPods, of course, were plastic. But yeah, of course, times were changing, and Apple was very clearly embracing more premium materials across iPhone, iPad, Macs. But yeah, I don't think that novelty factors really sell devices that much. I think the best example for that are probably foldables. Where foldables are definitely selling, I'm not saying they're a complete flop, but I wonder if the people buying like foldables and flip models and stuff like that, if those are not the same people who would be buying like regular smartphones like in the premium sector anyway, right? Like, I doubt that those people will suddenly buy a $500 like Galaxy A50 something or whatever. I think those people were always like interested in more premium devices with interesting, more advanced functionality. Sure, the folding is the most interesting part about the phone they ultimately went for, but folding also has like potentially real advantages. I would argue the flip doesn't, but let's just say that portability is a big thing for the flip, but on the fold itself, it's a big thing that of course you can kind of turn it into a mini tablet. And we saw that with like the Pixel 9 family reveal, that kind of the most interesting one that was shown off was arguably the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, because it was just such a big upgrade over the first generation Pixel Fold. How much of that can the iPhone 17 Slim replicate? I don't know. Like, it's just like, how much do you want your iPhone to be thinner versus how much do you want your iPhone to have longer battery life, better cameras, brighter screens? How much do you want your phone to not get hot as much, right? Do you want better speakers, better microphones, right? How much that is slim actually better? How much is it actually so much novel that it actually like turns your head, changes your like entire impression of the device, and you're like, man, I was potentially getting like the Pro model or whatever, but now I want the Slim, which that is not what Apple wants you to do. They definitely still would prefer you to buy the Pros, which are more expensive. And I just wonder, what are the benefits of the Slim versus now the regular 17 model, which would be like a 6.1-inch device, still very nice to hold. It would arguably not even be too much heavier than the Slim, because it would obviously be thinner. It would obviously be smaller, but it probably would have about the same battery capacity, right? Because you have a larger footprint on the 17 Slim, but you have it in like a thinner device. So I don't know. So let's talk about how people are currently seeing it. Well, one thing that has definitely happened is that people have definitely turned away from the impression that it would be some kind of high-end slim model that would have something so game-changing that it would justify like a $1,300 price point, or any price point for that matter, that sits a lot above the regular model, the Pros even, or even the Pro Max for that matter. And people have once again returned that it would sit somewhere between the regular 17 model and the 17 Pro. So it would be very much like a plus model. But what are the compromises it makes? What are the changes it makes? Well, for one, it would be a 6.5-inch display, so that's already somewhat of a downgrade over the current 6.7 inches on the, of course, the 15 plus, and what's rumored for the 16 plus as well. It would get a complete redesign. We don't yet know if that redesign is entirely focused on just making it thinner, potentially lighter, or if there would be other changes. If you actually look, for example, what's rumored for the 16 model, right? We of course know like the repositioned cameras and the vertical alignment. The Pro models will keep like their stove design, right? Stovetop design, where you have like 3 holes next to each other here. It was rumored for a while that Apple would potentially go with like a Google Pixel-esque design, where the cameras are like more in one line across the device. That would also come with like a redesigned motherboard and repositioned internals. We like, the problem with the Slim though is, or Air, is that it's rumored to have one camera. So would it have like one camera that is just set dead center? Would it really make sense for Apple to redesign their internals so much, which have of course like focused on like the cameras all being to one side for years? Would it really make sense to redesign it all for one model that has only one camera, right? If it had at least several cameras, I could kind of understand, because that design would stand out, unless they make it like some kind of weird, like ultra large camera with like a 2-inch sensor, which doesn't really work unfortunately on smartphones, because the larger the sensor, usually the kind of thicker the optics need to be. So to me, I just don't see that design change. So would it really just be thinner? Would it potentially be curved off again, and Apple could advertise that it's like, oh, it's the most comfortable iPhone to hold. It's curved off, and it's super thin, and it's super light, and it's perfectly balanced. We even made the screen a tiny bit smaller, just so that each component inside the device would be like in perfect balance whenever you hold it in your hand, right? Kind of stuff like that. I'm not sure how much sense that honestly makes, but yeah. So that's at least one thing. Of course, we've also talked about like potentially a narrow dynamic island on the Pro models, on the 17 Pro models. I don't know. The 17 Slim or Air is kind of designed to be cheaper than the Pros. At this point, we kind of like believe that. So would it make sense to give it like features that stand out and make it closer to the Pro? I don't know. That probably depends on its exact pricing and configuration. Um, so people have said it will have only a single 48 megapixel rear camera that would allow Apple to still advertise it as having as 2 optical lengths. Basically, if you zoom in exactly 2x on the center of the sensor, you get a 12 megapixel image, and Apple could say like, oh, it has 1x and 2x zoom. It's a little bit misleading, but a lot of companies are unfortunately doing that right now. Of course, we talked about that it would be getting an A919 chip, but it wouldn't be getting a Pro version. It would potentially have less RAM than the Pro models with 8 gigabytes instead of the 12 gigabytes that are rumored for the 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max. It would have a chassis that is a mix of aluminum and maybe titanium, supposedly now much more favoring aluminum because, of course, aluminum is lighter than titanium, and of course, no light model will ever be made of stainless steel. But yeah, that's that. And people are basically saying that this model will appeal to people who want something snazzier than a standard iPhone. So maybe Snazzy Labs can analyze that comment. Um, but those people might not really need the absolute top performance because obviously it would still have good performance. They don't need the larger screen size, which is actually quite good because if it has an LTPO screen and ProMotion, and it definitely will keep like the 2000 nits brightness or even higher that we already have on the base 15 models. So if you're somebody who's really, really scared off by the Pro Max's 6.9-inch screen, but you might also not be like that much in love with a 6.1-inch device, so this would be kind of Apple's like middle of the road, but still premiumly priced 6.5-inch solution. Again, I still don't know if it's a solution looking for a problem, but yeah, that's at least kind of the analysis that people are trying to provide. So you can get something that looks much cooler while still having the specifications of a regular iPhone. And basically, the argument, like, I still don't. One thing that I absolutely don't understand is that single camera rumor. Because a camera, yes, takes up space inside the device. And that space can be used, for example, for battery or just to bring down the price a little. But the ultra wide camera that Apple uses in the base iPhone models, it's not incredibly advanced. Even if Apple goes to like the 48 megapixel ultra wide with like the base 17 model, right? Maybe they adopt the same one that we will be getting in the 16 Pro, or at least it might adopt the 12 megapixel one that we have right now in the 15 Pro that gives you like macro photography. But to me, it's just like, how much space do you really save? And how much is that worth if you might be scaring people off by telling them, now a model that costs potentially maybe $200 more than the regular iPhone 17, I'm kind of inclined to believe that Apple would try to put it at like exactly $1,000 and maybe give it 256 gigabytes of base storage, while maybe the base iPhone 17 stays at $799 but keeps 128 gigabytes of base storage, kind of with the argument, if you're buying like the smallest new iPhone, you're buying it in the most base configuration, you probably don't need all that much storage. However, if you're paying $1,000, probably a lot of Android devices around 1,000 will be offering you 512 gigabytes or something like that. They will be offering you like 3 or 4 cameras. They definitely will be offering you some kind of high refresh rate. So while Apple will be finally in one line in something like a high refresh rate by bringing LTPO and ProMotion over here, but by like getting rid of 2 cameras from the Pros to just one, making it actually like more like closer to the iPhone SE. Like when you look at the back of the device and you see like, oh, it has only one camera, and it's not like this camera, it has like optical zoom that you can change, right? Going from like 0.5x to 1.5x or something crazy like that. So it would like get rid of the need of an ultra wide camera. At least that's not something that is rumored at this point. That would be one way I would 100% forgive it, having only one camera. But yeah, that is one thing where I believe it's very likely that Apple probably has several prototypes of the 17 Slim, and one might be with one camera and one might be with 2 cameras, and Apple might be internally like arguing, Do we want slightly higher margins with one camera but potentially lower sales? Or will we just price it at $1,000 with 256 gigabytes? It would replace the Plus while being a tiny bit smaller in terms of footprint, while having a new design that is thinner. We could advertise it as a brand new iPhone in the family. We could call it Air. Which would kind of replicate like the regular thing we have, right, with the MacBooks, with the iPad, right? So people would feel very familiar and drawn to that kind of rebranding. And then we would have an SE model that is our cheapest, and then we would have basically a non-branded or a very simple branded iPhone 17. It's kind of our default iPhone, our cheapest new iPhone, and it's very close to the Slim. They might even have the same battery capacity, I would argue, by maybe making like, because obviously the regular 17 will be much thicker but have a smaller footprint, and then the Slim could just be like, oh, it's much thinner but it's slightly taller, slightly wider, so it could have around the same battery capacity. That would probably explain one of the rumors that we have for the iPhone 16 Plus, which is that the iPhone 16 Plus is rumored to actually get like an almost 10% smaller battery, going from like 4,400 milliampere hours to 4,000. And the argument would be that basically, in my head, would be that by gimping the 16 Plus a little, Apple could say, look how thin the iPhone 17 Slim is, but it still has about the same battery life as the previous iPhone 16 Plus. And the reason why they can get away with that is because they do not give it the battery capacity of like the 14 Plus, which or 15 Plus, which are 4,400. But no, you would get it somewhere to around close the 4,000 milliampere hours of the 16 Plus. So maybe that's how Apple decides to like just structure their upgrades year to year. Artificially gimping the 16 Plus a little to make the subsequent 17 Slim look a lot better. So, but that's kind of the rumors we have right now. We've had other rumors about it, like potentially it being one of the first new iPhones to get Apple's own modem. It seems like definitely the iPhone SE could be a good candidate for that. Again, it was very, very unlikely to me that Apple would introduce their own modem on a $1,300 Slim with one camera. But maybe if it's $900 or $1,000 and much more of a direct plus replacement, maybe Apple could give it an Apple modem, get rid of millimeter wave inside there. Maybe all around the world they could sell it without a SIM card tray. So that would be some internal space that could be used for batteries and stuff like that. Of course, the battery would like get their new electromagnetic adhesive technology, so it might be easier to replace. And while the Pro models move up to like with better cooling, newer advanced technology to something like 45-watt charging and 20-watt wireless charging, things like that, maybe the Slim could just use all those new technologies, but in a more compact form factor, and it would be chargeable at around 30 watts, and the wireless charging would be around 15 watts, right? So it would be very much in line with previous Pro models and definitely more advanced than previous Plus models. It just would be very, very much definitely behind the latest Pro and Pro Max models. So I do believe that that could work. Again, it would depend a little on just how much thinner you can make it, how much lighter you can make it, if you can maybe appeal to a new market with that. Of course, that then also depends. I've talked about like the 16 Plus potentially being gimped to make the iPhone 17 Slim or Air look much better. But what happens then the year after, where in 2026, Apple is rumored to introduce like an iPhone flip? How would that work now when Apple now has 5 models in the lineup? Would they get rid of the Slim right away? Would they keep selling it? Would they risk overcomplicating the lineup much more? In previous videos, we have speculated that the Slim and the Flip might be one model. That definitely doesn't seem to be the case, because a lot of leakers are just doubling down on the existence of an iPhone Air. And obviously, if it was a flip device, then everything about it would be a little different, right? And then the flip could still learn a lot from the Slim, right? Because obviously a flip, once unfolded, needs to be pretty thin so it doesn't get too thick once you fold it back up. However, with the Slim, of course, like you can maybe make the argument that, oh, Apple is using this as like an experiment to test themselves. How thin can they make an iPhone? How light can they make a new iPhone? How good of a battery can they pack in a very small form factor? And once they achieve that, they just move on to the flip model and then utilize all those new miniaturization technologies, or basically all that stuff when it comes to making something thinner while still keeping it durable, while still giving it good components. Maybe that's where they sort of like trying to go with this. And basically, the Air would have a more appealing design than any other iPhone here, and that would be its biggest selling factor. Of course, as I said, with the Flip model potentially coming just a year after, that of course kills its appeal, because anybody who might want the quote-unquote snazziest new iPhone would at that point very likely just move to an iPhone Flip. And at some point, like somebody like me, I've always said I don't care much about foldables. I will certainly never buy a flip style product, but if Apple ever introduces an iPhone Fold, maybe one that has a very small crease, or preferably like no crease at all, or even better, if Apple at some point introduces like an iPhone rollable. It's a little silly branding, but iPhone roll, iPhone on a roll, that would interest me. But now we are talking not devices in the $1,300 range. We are talking devices definitely in the $2,000 range. Yeah, so people are basically trying to make the point that to them it just makes a lot more sense than the Plus. I actually disagree. I think that the Plus is a good product. I just think it's priced poorly. Like, I think that the reason why the regular iPhone sells so well at $800 is because $800 is kind of far enough from $1,000 that if you just want like a brief transaction of money, like you can spend $800, but once you reach 900, you're kind of inclined to say, well, I'm already that close to 1,000. Should I maybe spend 1,100 or even 1,200 on like a Pro with more storage, or a Pro Max with like everything a lot better? And I think if Apple brought the prices down even by $50, I think that would already, like on the regular models, I think that would already benefit the Plus a lot. And if they brought it down by $100, where the regular iPhone is $700, the Plus is, let's say the Plus is $850, but instead of 128 gigs of storage, it actually starts with 256. So it actually has like different value propositions over the regular iPhone. At that point, I would say that the Plus would probably start selling like 20, 30, 40% better, and instead of like 5% market share of the like the latest iPhones, it could actually sell like 10, 15% of all iPhones sold. It still wouldn't be the most popular model, I believe, but especially once you add like crucial technologies like ProMotion, which especially once you get closer to $1,000, that's when people start caring about things like higher refresh rates. Then I would believe that it would just make sense to keep the Plus model, keep it simple, keep it maybe trim down its display size from 6.7 to 6.5 inches. Potentially reduce its battery capacity a little to keep it just thinner and lighter. But keep two cameras, and try to just price it a little bit better. And I think that Apple knows this. And instead of like bringing the iPhone Plus pricing down, they're much more inclined to say, well, how can we take similar tech to this, but actually price it higher? At that point, even if it still sells only a very small percentage of all iPhones, well, at that point, if it keeps generating a lot more profit per model than the Plus ever did, well, now that makes a lot more sense if they can like reignite like a lot of attention from potential reviewers and maybe customers who are very like aesthetics focused. I think that makes sense. However, it will depend a lot on the execution. If the 17 Air comes with a completely trash battery life, if it really has only one camera, and it might be like therefore an inferior camera system to the regular 17, right? I could see maybe Apple giving the 17 a 48 megapixel camera, but it's like a slightly outdated one. And then an ultra wide that isn't even that great. But then the Air gets like the latest generation Pro camera, like main camera from the Pro and Pro Max, but it doesn't have an ultra wide. I think that could be a trade-off that at that point makes at least some sense, and people might not be like actively angry at the choices that Apple makes with it. Again, very much depends on the execution. Not saying it's a foregone conclusion that it will fail or nor that it will succeed, but that's kind of where I see it. Again, let me know what you think about it, where you think that it's just a completely outrageous idea. I'm still also like questioning like how will it work with something like Apple's new design elements like the capture button. If you make just the chassis way too thin, some of those things that feel very good about like buttons and stuff like that, it just starts to go away a little. Of course, durability would be another issue. Battery life, I've mentioned that. Charging times. And of course, individual decisions, right? Where something like, I'm pretty sure that it costs Apple close to nothing to bring like 10 gigabyte per second like transfer speeds to USB-C to the Pro models. But would an iPhone 17 Air get like that faster transfer charging of the Pros, or would it potentially get like the much slower charging of the regular models, right? So and then of course 12 gigs of RAM versus 8 gigs of RAM. Like again, if you're pricing it potentially closer to the Pros than you do to the base model, at that point you have to ask yourself, well, if I take something away that people might really care about in that price range, will people not just buy the Pro and Pro Max? And at that point, I just burdened my logistics with creating yet another middle model that doesn't sell well, something that happened to Apple with the Plus models, and before that happened to them with the Mini models. So again, this is why I say it's weird, not because I actually believe it's like completely impossible to make this work. I think if Apple gives it two cameras, even if the ultra wide is not that great, it still is two cameras. If they bring the battery capacity about in size with the 17, and basically the argument would be, well, you technically get lower on-screen time with the 17 Air, but you get about the same standby time and things like that. Maybe Apple could sell potentially like more battery attachment accessories with the 17 Air or something like that. There definitely is a market here. When analysts like Jeff Poo focus on like, oh, this will reinvigorate sales, all after we have heard like months of rumors that Apple plans to sell more 16 series devices than they have 15 series devices. I just don't know how that works. Unless Apple expects the 17 family to be a complete flop without the 17 Air, I just don't know what that kind of prediction means. And of course, Air doesn't mean that much in Apple's family anyway, because infamously the latest iPad Air is actually thicker than the latest iPad Pro. So again, while that definitely wouldn't be the case on the iPhone, because the Pro and Pro Max would also be much more battery focused, performance focused, have better cooling, stuff like that. It's definitely not like the Air branding is like this infallible, fantastic branding. Like we've heard about the iPad Pro currently like cannibalizing iPad Air sales. And at that point, like, sure, the Air isn't bad and the Air exists as an option, but at what point would Apple say like, oh, now we burdened ourselves with the logistics of designing this new device, of marketing it, obviously creating more and more of those. And if it doesn't sell because people actually want our most expensive and our best models, at what point are we just hurting ourselves by trying to create something that people don't actually want? And this is why I'm saying that don't underestimate the impact that the engineers might be having here. Maybe they're seeing this as a great internal challenge to design the thinnest and lightest possible big iPhone that still works really well. And I wouldn't be surprised if Apple ends up either canceling this device somewhat last minute, or they might just like redesign it in small ways, like giving it a larger camera, maybe even just making it a plus model again, or something like that in terms of branding. So who knows? But that's pretty much the state that we're at. I definitely won't be buying the Air for myself, but I'll definitely be covering it once it comes out. Now, there is also another weird thing that Apple is supposedly working on, and that is an Apple tabletop robotic home device that is rumored to come out in 2026. And it's rumored to be priced at around $1,000. Now, it should be said, whenever we talk about stuff being coming in 2026 or something like that, of course, that is always subject to change. It's always subject to does Apple even have that much confidence in the device? They might want to bring it out later so they can bring pricing down a little more so it doesn't flop entirely. They might not want to replicate some of the early issues they had when they launched like the HomePod at like close to $400. So, but this would basically be a home device. So it would have a speaker element to it. It would have a robotic arm. Think of like the old iMac that you could move around a little. Or basically think like a monitor with like an arm that is much more adjustable than just height or swivel. And then it would have like an iPad-like screen on top with, of course, at that point, microphones and cameras, so that you can also have like FaceTime calls with it. Supposedly that arm would just like move around 360 degrees, and that would allow you to just be on camera basically. This is weird to me. Now, I absolutely agree with someone internally at Apple that this probably would sell not too poorly, because rich people, I think, will react actually pretty well to this product. They will just say, oh, it's like the better HomePod, or look, it's an iPad kind of that I always have in my living room, and it's always charged, and it's always ready for FaceTime and things like that. But yeah, this is from Mark Gurman, so this is why I'm covering it. This is inspired, the renders we're seeing here, by a G4 iMac. Of course, we don't know if that's exactly what it'd be like. So it would be a thin robotic arm. The display would tilt up and down and rotate a full 360 degrees. It would be a smart home command center. So obviously functionality that we already have kind of in the Apple TV and the HomePod, stuff like that. It would allow for FaceTime calls. It would allow you to monitor home security tools. Nothing surprising. Of course, things that would already work very well on your existing iPhone or iPad. So I don't know if that would make you like potentially spend $1,000 on that. It would work with Siri and Apple Intelligence, so maybe that would be part of why it would be like a premium product. So it would have like at least an A17 or later Apple processor, 8 gigs of RAM or more. At that point, though, like you're giving it specs so good. At what point wouldn't you just want it to be like an accessory that connects to an iPad? But which of course would bring down the price of this down a lot. But yeah, you never know. So supposedly Apple has prioritized development of the device recently. So previously they were kind of on and off about it, but now they have likely committed to it. It's under the purview of Kevin Lynch, who you know from like the guy who usually demos the latest changes to watchOS. And who had overseen Apple's self-driving car venture, but a lot of the resources and development stuff that Apple has put into their car stuff, which is now obviously canceled, has supposedly moved to different AI projects. So whether it's people directly working on large language models or specific features for like Apple Intelligence and Siri, some of them might have moved to projects that are like, oh, it's an assistant device, right? And that assistant runs on Apple Intelligence, and that's partially why a lot of stuff can run offline on it. That's why it perfectly integrates into your ecosystem. That's why it already takes over the functionality of like a basic iPad for a lot of things. Which again, this is why we basically have this render where it's basically like a basic iPad connected to it. And some people are saying it would launch somewhere around 2026 or 2027. Apple wants to get the price down to around $1,000. So it's, again, I'm not saying that this device is actually like worth $1,000 right now, and Apple is just trying to make it cheaper to make. Given that Apple likes to sell devices at like about 60 to double the price of a production, so maybe it costs $400-$500 to make, and Apple wants to bring it down to like $350 in production, so they can charge $700-$900 for it. Again, you still have to consider like marketing costs and however much research and development costs to make this. But yeah, I'm not sure. I think that if this was like a sub $500 device, I definitely could see it have a future. But it also would depend, like, would it be a full-on HomePod replacement? Because everything that we hear of it doesn't quite sound like it, right? Like, you don't want to waste a lot of money in making the best possible speaker and then put it somewhere where you can also always like film yourself for FaceTime, right? You want a great speaker to probably stand right next to your TV, preferably 2 or more of those, and be interconnected and always do like TV-like things, movie things, like music stuff. You don't really want to ever like say, oh, one person in my home cannot right now turn on a movie on the TV with the best possible speakers because I'm taking a FaceTime call on this device. This sounds much more like a personal device that you would have on like your work table or even potentially on the kitchen where you just watch YouTube. But at that point, would you really pay $1,000 for a device like that? So some weird stuff coming from Apple, potentially. Again, there's still potential for a lot of this to be canceled. I just want to remind people, whenever we see something truly, truly weird and truly something that might not fit in the broader like family of Apple devices, in like the ecosystem strategy that we of course know that Apple has broadly, it's very likely that some of those things might never see the light of day. If Apple plans a 2026 release for it, but they find that they just cannot bring down pricing to below $1,000, at which point they know it wouldn't sell too well, it wouldn't review too well, they will probably just say, let's eat the cost. Let's take whatever we have learned from it, like miniaturizing speakers, the kind of like movable parts for the arm, and let's just put it into like the regular HomePod, the speakers we have in all of our products. Let's put like the swiveling 360-degree arm, maybe in some kind of super premium display stand for the next Pro display. And similar thing with, as I said, with the iPhone Air, where Apple could say like, oh, we've learned how to make the battery even thinner without like compromising too much on capacity or charging speed. Instead of putting into an Air where it would be still constrained by like a 5 millimeter or 5.5, 6 millimeter thick chassis, let's just put it back into a regular 7 millimeter thick iPhone and just enjoy the fact that we have now this battery inside that is so much easier to work with, right? Even if it swells up a little inside, it won't like burst the chassis or something like that. We have much easier production because not everything has to be as absurdly miniaturized. We can bring down the pricing a little because the production itself might be a little like less involved. So again, a lot of things can happen, good things, bad things, weird things. But I just want to implore you to take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt. Again, the iPhone Air is rumored to come in late 2025. This robotic HomePod-esque thing supposedly is coming 2026 or 2027. Everything can, of course, be pushed into further away, or it could be completely canceled. We have seen that time and time again over the years. I'm not betting on any of that turning into real products, but I also want to cover this because this is still coming from somewhat reputable sources like, of course, Mark Gurman, and at this point other analysts and other leakers are also corroborating it. And then, of course, the iPhone Flip, of course, have to be considered. That would be coming like a year or two after the Air. So maybe at some point Apple decides it just doesn't make sense to make both products. So even if both might be real in like research and development, maybe one of them or even both never hit actual production. So you just have to consider those things whenever you analyze Apple leaks and rumors. Yeah, but that's about it for today's video. I didn't want it to make it too long one. As always, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, sharing it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it, comment on it. Of course, whenever you catch me live, please consider leaving a small super chat or a super sticker as a direct donation. Or if you want to support this channel directly in the long term, become a channel member here or become a Patreon supporter. A link for that is in the description of this channel. So I'll see you guys next time. I'll probably like next week I will have some time to do video. As I said, the week after that I'll be working a lot more. So but I also don't quite know my schedule. So maybe I'll still have time for a few videos in between. But that's about it for now. I'll let you know my schedule. As always, please let me know what you would like to see me cover next. And I'll see you next time. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.